Three, two, one, here we come. Sebastian and I are live once again. No Anthony Power today, you guys. It's Anthony's birthday. He's celebrating his 35th birthday, I think, over in the UK today. So it's just Sebastian here. Luckily for us, he's got one of the top channels in the sector for Bitcoin mining information, knowledge, and today we're going to be featuring all of Sebastian's insights into the top 15 or 16 miners in the sector. So Sebastian, we were just chatting about our first podcast together. It's been well over a year now. Great to see so much growth for yourself in the space. And it sounds like you're going to be joining us down in Nashville this week as well, hey?
Yeah, so thanks, Bryce, for having me on, and happy birthday to Anthony. Anthony is obviously celebrating his birthday today, so happy big birthday to him. We'll see Anthony and you in Nashville coming up, so that's gonna be fun and exciting. I'm gonna be there on Thursday, Friday, and I gotta take off actually on Saturday morning for a birthday. I gotta attend on Saturday night, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. It should be a fun couple days.
Yeah, it really should. And we just found out we're staying in the same hotel, the Omni Nashville. So it's going to be a great party down there. We've got some good events, some great speakers. We'll talk about that in a second here. But before we do, Sebastian, a lot of media attention towards Bitcoin, especially in relation to this conference coming up and Trump's expected speech and announcement at the conference. How are you feeling from a macro level before we get into any of the company specific details here?
Well, I think it's going to depend on what Trump says. Trump's going to be speaking on Saturday, or I think it's at 2 o'clock to 2:30. So he's got a 30-minute window there. We'll see what he says. We'll see if they make Bitcoin possibly a reserve asset for them. That's something that's been floating around. If that happens, I think that's going to be really bullish in the short term. In the long term, it's going to be even better, I think.
I do too. Yeah. Anything, as they say, a rising tide lifts all ships. Anything to do with Bitcoin in the media, I think, is a positive or bullish thing for the entire sector. Obviously, the Bitcoin mining stocks act as a great proxy. So we'll get right into the slides here, you guys. We've got an individual slide for each and every one of the Bitcoin miners. We're going to get Sebastian's take on them in a second, but a few housekeeping items here first and foremost. Sebastian, I don't really think you need much of an introduction. I'm sure most of our followers and subscribers also subscribe to your channel. But for anyone who doesn't know what you do and what you're about, what is the Sebastian official channel? Why did you start it? And what do you really focus on?
Oh, well, the channel is just what you guys talk about also. It's about the Bitcoin miners. I do a lot more, I think, data collection than you guys do, but you guys also have great interviews. So I definitely enjoy coming on to your guys' show and watching your guys' stuff as well with the interviews of the CEO from the miners side of things. But I'm just talking about the miners, looking at what's going on with them, hash rate, all the same stuff you guys are looking at, and then looking to see where they could possibly be in the future as well. Are they undervalued or overvalued right now? And that's basically it. I've been doing this for now, I think I'm going like on 3 years now. But it's been a fun time. It's been a fun ride. I'm definitely enjoying it. And I'm hoping to continue to do this for several more years.
Yeah, I think you definitely will be around for a few more years, Sebastian. You've got one of the best channels, as I say, some of the best data, the spreadsheets, the amount of comprehensive information you collect for each and every one of these miners that leads into those price targets is just phenomenal. So if for whatever reason you're not following Sebastian, you guys go give him a follow on X and of course on YouTube. First slide here, Sebastian, I wanted to get your take on is Bitcoin price. So this is generally how we kick off these weekly sessions. 66,900 at the time I took this snapshot this morning, really hovering in this 66, 67 range. We did see a local high just north of 68,000 there on Monday. And I also wanted to talk about the ETF inflows. Pretty phenomenal that BlackRock has only had a single day of outflows in over 6 months, and $526 million worth of inflows. Second biggest day in the trading history here in the last 88 days this week. So how are you feeling about Bitcoin price? And I guess as a secondary question, the ETF buying pressure?
Well, I think whatever's going to happen with Bitcoin on a day-to-day is going to happen, right? We're going to have the upswings. We're going to have the downswings on it as well. It's going to be volatile. We know that. The long-term picture is still bullish, very bullish, I believe. I think we're going to get at least 250,000, if not higher than that. Some are calling for 200,000. So I'm not worried about that in long term. In the short term, it can be volatile, like I said. And then the interesting thing about BlackRock is I think I saw a tweet today from somebody that says that BlackRock had more inflows than the QQQ, which is just outstanding so far this year. So it's outperformed the QQQ on that regard, and I'm hoping it does a lot better going forward as well. And then we have, I believe, the Ethereum ETF starting up either today or tomorrow as well. We'll see what those inflows are for Ethereum.
Yeah, I think they start trading today, and I actually put that on the Bit Digital slide. I wanted to get your take there, Sebastian, once we start talking about the companies, because obviously they hold a tremendous amount of Ethereum on their balance sheet. They've got the flywheel staking model. So we'll get into that one. But how do you think the Ethereum ETF will impact the Bitcoin ETF inflows? Do you think they're in competition for one another, or do you think they're separate investor bases?
I think they're separate investor bases. You know, I think Ethereum is going to be a little bit more volatile than Bitcoin has been. Well, it has been anyways. But I think you have a different breed of investors going into Ethereum. You have more of the people that are a little bit more, I don't want to say risk averse, but maybe a little bit more risky on those types of things. Whereas Bitcoin, you're looking at it as a digital gold version of it. So with Ethereum, you're looking at the potential that's there going forward with smart contracts, all that, everything else that's entailing in that. You also have some other coins that can be placed on Ethereum. So there's a lot more going on with Ethereum than just Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I think, is still going to be the top dog here going forward. And we'll see how much inflows we get for Ethereum. I think that's going to kind of shed a little light into it as much as how much demand is actually out there for it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see that myself. And you're right. Ethereum is more of a utility token versus a store of value with Bitcoin. So I personally agree that I think they're separate investor bases. I hope we don't really see a deterioration in the amount of interest or inflows into the Bitcoin ETF. And I'm almost expecting it may add even more strength to Bitcoin as more people want to now get exposure to crypto. Maybe they get involved through the Ethereum ETF, and that leads to Bitcoin buying down the road. So we'll see what happens there. Definitely a monumental day, though, for cryptocurrency and the Ethereum community.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, who would have thought just 6 months ago that we would have had a Ethereum ETF with everything that Gary Gensler has been saying about it, where he views it as a security? I didn't think it was going to get to this point anytime soon.
Yeah, I didn't either. And I'm laughing because I actually have an image of Gary Gensler on the next slide there, or Gensler on the next slide. So we'll get into that. But before we do, DMG, the top performer this morning, up 6.5%, just under 7%, kind of a mixed bag. My portfolio was actually down quite a bit this morning, Sebastian. And you can see on the charts here, really a nice recovery for most of the miners from those lows right after the open there. Anything stand out or surprising in terms of the trading activity this morning?
No, not really. Bitcoin's down a little bit here today. I think that's kind of what we would expect to see with Bitcoin miners as well. DMG is a surprise a little bit here. It's up quite nicely. It's up 7%. We had Argo up yesterday, up huge, like 16% for really no reason. There's no news coming out of that one. So, I mean, the market is going to do what the market does. Sometimes you have people rotating from one stock to the other and looking for the low fish to catch, possibly.
Yeah, it could be. You're right about Argo though. We've seen a few of these odd days. Soluna, I remember a few. They'll just spike 20, 25, 30% in a day on really no news at all. So maybe you're right there, Sebastian. Just some rotating going on with some of the bigger institutional investments. Hash rate is another one we like to talk about quickly here. So a nice little recovery since the start of July. We've kind of plateaued in that $52 range. We've heard on our channel, Sebastian, kind of $29 is rock bottom where most of these publicly traded miners just would have to start shutting off. Do you have any concerns in this low $50 range, or do you think most of the miners had kind of planned and budgeted for that post-halving?
I think most of them have planned and budgeted for this. I mean, we saw where the hash price was before the halving event. I mean, you basically cut that in half. You're going to be around the 50s right now. So I think we were hoping a little bit more for the Bitcoin transaction fees being up a little bit higher. I think they were at 13 yesterday. So that's pretty low. It's not a lot going on there. And then the hash price. And also, I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but yesterday I saw that the network hash rate on Bitcoin increased to like 870 something on the 1 hour or daily chart. Basically, that was like the top on it.
Sure.
So that's just crazy. That's a lot of machines being plugged in there. So I think we're still very bullish with the miners going forward on the hash rate growth projections and things like that, which then I believe is going to lead also to more price appreciation of Bitcoin going forward as well.
Yeah, that's insane. Global hash rate getting close to 900. It's going to be quite interesting when we start cracking the 1,000. Hey,
Oh,
just continuing to add new model, more efficient machines, and we see some of the purchase orders, the exahash growth targets of these miners. We're going to talk about really no wonder we're starting to see that number increase, I suppose, eh?
Yeah, and it's going to continue to go parabolic, I believe, as long as we continue to have these machines that are going to be getting more efficient. You got Bitdeer coming out with Seal Miner next year. Sometimes it's going to be like 5 joules per terahash. I'm guessing that's going to be like at least probably 400 terahash machine there, somewhere around there, in order to reach those numbers. So we're just going to have this kind of doubling effect, it seems like, every year or every other year, potentially, with network hash rate going forward.
Yeah, really interesting. I definitely, when I was doing my modeling and thinking about the post-halving mining world, I didn't factor in the amount of improvement and innovation in the mining technology itself and the rigs. I did not think we would be anywhere close to 5 joules per terahash by 2025. Now, we haven't seen the machine yet. Do you think that's reasonable and realistic, Sebastian?
Yeah, I think they're going to the 3 nanometer, and they're going to keep getting better and better improvements in that die chip size and how much they can cram into it. So you do see those improvements over time. We were at 4 nanometers for a couple of years here. Once we get past the 3 nanometers, then we're going to 2 nanometers, which are going to be probably in 2028, 2030 timeline around there. So in between now and then, the 3 nanometers is going to be basically a workhorse for us, for the industry. And that's just going to improve over time, I think, as well, as we've seen. Like the S19 just came out last year. That was at 100 terahash. Now we're at 200 terahash with the S21s as well. So you're seeing that increase happening here. It's happening pretty fast too.
Yeah, most definitely. And 2028 will be the year of the next halving as well. So interesting to see those 2 nanometers syncing up with that cycle. So next slide for you, Sebastian, talking about Nashville. So obviously, we just announced in the intro, you're going to be joining the party in Nashville this week, coming down Thursday to Saturday. Unfortunately, you have to leave just before the big Trump speech. But a number of key headliners here. Who are you looking most forward to listening to, aside from myself on the stage there, Sebastian?
I'll say from you and Anthony, I'd like to see. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. If what's his name? Gosh, first guy on the left there.
Sailor.
Sailor, thank you. Yes, looking to hear what Sailor
You've
has
been
to
in the
say.
industry 3 years and you don't know Michael Saylor?
I know Michael Sailor, but sometimes my memory is not that great with names.
You know what's funny? I was doing the exact same thing the other day, and I could not think of his name, and I just felt so bad about it.
I know.
Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah,
yeah,
we
bad
could do
guy.
what Sailor has to say. That might be interesting there. I would have loved to hear what Trump has to say, but I got family plans that I got to attend on Saturday night, so I'll be leaving early, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the whole lineup here. Kathy Wood will be great, Edward Snowden, and RFK Jr., in addition to Trump. So, even more political interest in the Bitcoin stage or Bitcoin event here. This is a quick plug for Anthony and I. So, sorry, Sebastian. I'll take the text off the screen so you guys can see. So, I am hosting a panel Thursday. We've got CleanSpark on there, Bitfarms, Jeff Lucas, Core Scientific, which will be great. We just got back from their facility. So Daniel Goodman on, and Sean Owen, who's the CEO of Salt Lending. I met with the guys this week. We've got a great question talking about the growth levers available to these Bitcoin miners, what works and why, and then where they see that going in the future. So that's going to be 1:30 to 2:10 on the mining stage on Thursday, the 25th. The following day, the 26th, so Friday, Anthony's got a great panel on AI and mining, kind of the next wave or next generation for a lot of these companies. That's going to be at 11 in the morning. Same thing, 40 minutes on the mining stage. So Sam Tabar, Aiden Killick, who we just actually had a podcast with last night, and Andrew Garini, which will be a great podcast as well, or sorry, a great panel as well. Now, moving along, Sebastian, this slide I wanted to get your take on. So you just talked about our good friend Gary there in the bottom right. It's sounding more and more like he may resign next year based on this Biden exit. So that's obviously a big, I guess, thorn out of the side of crypto enthusiasts behind. We've also got word that Trump may be considering BlackRock's own CEO Larry Fink as his Treasury secretary. And we also saw JD Vance appointment, a very pro Bitcoiner as well. So we're starting to see all types of Bitcoin in the media here, not to mention the potential of this US reserve or Bitcoin strategic reserve. I heard rumors in the neighborhood of 500,000 Bitcoin is what they were actually talking about or was pitched in
For
the
this cycle?
conversation. Yeah.
Wow, that'd be
So
insane.
now we know they own a lot of Bitcoin through confiscation as well, but this would really set the bar, I think, around the world for governments, blue chip corporations. It's everybody rushing in at that point, eh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if they do that, if they set it as a reserve possible, as an additional to what they have now and bonds and treasuries and all that stuff, that's going to be a huge boom to Bitcoin going forward. You're going to see other companies. I mean, we already see companies getting into it anyways. We got a company in I think it's Japan. That's basically a MicroStrategy duplicate there. They're buying up as much Bitcoin as they can, also doing debt and things like that with it. You're seeing, was it Square buying up 10% of the profits they have Bitcoin each month. So you're going to see that snowball effect happen over time. It's just going to accelerate, I believe, going forward as well. And we'll see what Gary Gensler, if he does resign, I think that'd be kind of good. But depending who we get in his place, well, I'm hoping it's going to be better than what we had. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's a nice way to say it. Now, Elon Musk also came out with the saber eyes there as well. He's come out as a strong advocate of Trump. So we're starting to see some support from the tech or high tech side of things as well. Michael Dell also rumored to be getting into Bitcoin. Do you think we're going to start to see companies adopt a Bitcoin balance sheet in a big way here during this year, Sebastian?
It might not be this year, might be next year though. But I think it will happen eventually. It's just going to take a little bit more time. I mean, we do have the ETFs now that are available to them as well. That makes it easy for them to get into it that way. They could still do it by themselves with self-custody if they wanted to, but that brings in other challenges into it. But they can handle it, especially the big tech companies. I mean, they have the expertise; they can do it, and in their sleep probably. So I think eventually they will have it because you got Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. They got so much cash on hand right now. They don't know what to do with it. If they put a little bit into Bitcoin, I think that would just set them apart and be a good thing going forward.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to see those cash reserves sit there and not really do anything for these companies when you see the price of Bitcoin and the market reaction to companies like MicroStrategy, for example. One question that came up, Sebastian, in the chat here is in relation to Bitfarms. They're actually our first slide we have loaded up in the deck as well. So I wanted to get your take on Bitfarms. They just went through a fireside chat hosted by Wainwright. So obviously getting some investor attention there. We had Ben on the program after the big CEO announcement and appointment. How are you feeling about Bitfarms right now? And where do you see this one going over the next few quarters?
Well, I'm very positive on Bitfarms right now, especially with them appointing Ben Gagnon as the CEO there. I've been calling on that since like May for them to do that. I think he was the right person to do that, to get in that position, and we'll see how he does. I have high hopes for him. I think he's very smart. He's very talented. He knows his space very well. So for that reason, I'm very positive on Bitfarms going forward. Also, them getting Fannie Phillip as on the shareholders, not the shareholders, but the actual,
Directors.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
For the directors there as well, I think that was a great get for them. She's got plenty of experience in the industry. She's also on the Bitcoin mining for Canada, right? If I'm not
Okay.
mistaken,
Yeah.
right on the uh, consortium there. So she's got plenty of experience. I think that's a great get. Their growth plans for this year are great. 21 exahash. They bought up or they're leasing a facility in Pennsylvania as well. That gets them to possibly 35 exahash next year as well. They're looking to HPC AI. I think there's just going to be good things going forward. The only thing is we need to get Riot off their back. I think that's the only thing that right now is maybe holding the stock back.
Yeah. Now, do you hold shares in Bitfarms and Riot?
No, just Bitfarms.
Okay. So your stance is they would be better off individually without Riot then, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the question I have for you, I guess, in relation to Paraguay, we just had Aiden and Frank on from Hive last night. They announced that new 100 megawatt data center in Paraguay. Bitfarms has a huge presence in this country already. Do you think we're going to start to see more companies shifting their attention to South America?
Oh yeah, we're seeing it already. Marathon's also in there a little bit. They're doing, I think it's a joint venture in Paraguay right now. So they're dabbling with it. They're looking into it. And I think with Hive getting into it as well, I think that kind of alleviates a lot of the FUD that we were hearing about Paraguay and the possible mining ban there, and then the increase in pricing and all this stuff. That it's just not a friendly environment to get into. I think that's been squashed. And also, I think with Riot trying to buy them out, Riot wouldn't possibly try to buy out Bitfarms if they thought there were issues with Paraguay. So that kind of alleviates that issue there. And I do think that we're going to see mining companies try and look for these kind of areas, especially Paraguay, where they have that hydroelectric dam there. That's one of the largest, I think, in the world, and it just generates so much electricity that they have spare electricity, I guess, to give out to the miners potentially, instead of selling to their neighbors, which they can then generate more revenue for the country, going with the miners and going with their neighbor. So I think it makes sense there. And as long as the environment, political environment, is stable, and they don't mess anything up, I think that should be a good thing going forward. And we're going to probably see other companies looking at other countries as well going forward.
Gotcha. Yeah, really interesting development. Frank spoke a lot about those community partnerships you just mentioned. And Ben, interestingly enough, told us the lead times for a lot of the transformers and electrical equipment in South America is actually quicker to source as well. So interesting from that dynamic. Now, Sebastian, we're getting some questions about TeraWulf next. I'm not sure if you hold this one yourself or not. I do in my account. It's one of my top 3 positions, actually. They just came out with the elimination of their debt in one foul swoop here at the start of the month. They've also been involved in some Spaces content with DR Lewis, so he's been a guest on our channel as well. What's your take on the Wolf Pack right now and TeraWulf?
Well, I'm excited to hear that they paid off their debt. That was one of the big concerns I had for them going into the halving event. They had over 120 million in like December of last year, and they paid down quite a bit of it. They were down to 70 by the end of, I believe it was the first quarter of this year. So they still had quite a bit to pay off, and it's nice to see that they actually did that. They didn't provide how much they used the ATM to do that, but that would have been nice to know there. But nonetheless, I think that's great news for Wolf. I think the growth they have going forward is going to be interesting. It's limited in the growth for this year, but I think they're going to have more growth in next year as they're building out the sites. And then they're also trying to get into HPC AI, which I think is pretty interesting. I think it's a good get if they can get a good customer in there, but that's the big question. What kind of customer will they get? Will they get the customer similar to what Core Scientific has, or even Bit Digital, where it's a multi-year contract? Or are they going to get these kind of smaller contracts like we're seeing with IREN, that are like for 3 to 6 months or something like that? That's the big question there.
Yeah, it makes sense. 2 other thoughts I had, or questions, I guess, about Wolf for you. The HOPA Port Authority news story. I'm not sure how much you read into that one. Do you see any merit there? Just the value of the Lake Mariner facility itself, 1,800 hectares, water access to high voltage power. Do you think there's something there in terms of a buyout opportunity?
Possibly, yeah. They have the right facility at the right location. If you wanted to do a large scale HPC, that would be a good place to do it.
For sure. And then on the flip side of that, they've also got opportunity with Amazon or AWS at their other facility, taking over Talon's portion of that. What is your thoughts there in terms of hyperscaler involvement in the industry?
Well, the hyperscalers are definitely looking for megawatts, and Talon had the megawatts there. I can't remember how many megawatts it was at the deal, but they paid $700 some odd million for that facility there. So that was a good get for Amazon, and it kind of, I think, at that point made it more clear to the industry that this is the way forward potentially with these hyperscalers. That they're going to need megawatts, whether they're going to be buying out. I mean, there's some speculations right now that Cipher might be on the chopping block to get bought out by somebody. We don't know who, but that's out there. So it is happening. We're seeing M&As possibly here. We saw also Core. We've tried to get Core Scientific for like $1 billion. That never went through, but you're seeing that it's happening out there.
Yeah, it definitely is. Cipher was another one that had a massive move on a single day there with really no news. Maybe I'll bring up Cipher next, Sebastian, and we can talk about them. They're slide number 11 here, so I'll bring it up on the screen and get your take on Cipher.
Sure.
So this is one we don't regularly cover on the channel. I threw up their slide here. I actually highlighted July 10th. They were back in the $4.32 range. They effectively doubled their share price in about a week. They've pulled back a little bit now into the 650 range, but I know a lot of people in the X community very bullish about Cipher. Obviously, their energy rates are unmatched almost in the industry. What's your thoughts on this company?
Yeah, I mean, they're a great company. They have a lot of growth going forward. They're building out the Black Pearl site in Texas. They have some joint ventures that they're in as well. They have a lot going for them. they're supposed to get to like 13x the hash by the end of this year. That's their goal. They're going to transition over some of their older machines to newer machines that will help them out there. And then they have more growth into 2025. They are also doing, I believe, a pilot program for HPC AI, just like I think it's like maybe 2 megawatts or something like that, just to see how that works out. And they're saying that they have a lot of interest from HPC AI customers, but their power rates are just fantastic there. They're also, I think, buying another site as well in Texas here recently. So they have a good roadmap going forward with them. I mean, the power cost alone, I think, is what's attractive to maybe some of the HPC AI hyperscalers potentially. If there is a buyout, possibly, I can see why.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was going to ask if you had any, I guess, inkling of who the potential buyer could be, but it sounds like not at this point. You think in hyperscaler, though, hey?
I'm thinking it's going to be somebody that's going to be a hyperscaler because I mean, you're looking at possibly what are they valued at right now? Close to probably 2 billion, I think.
It's right there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
2.003.
yeah. So somebody's going to have to pay a nice premium on that, and who else is going to be able to afford that other than hyperscalers?
You don't have a couple billion sitting in the checking account over there, Sebastian?
Nope. I
No,
wish I did.
unfortunately, nor do I. Hey, now I'm going to break out to a new view here, get us on big screen so everyone can see our great mug shots, and get a couple questions not specific to any one company. So I know you do a lot of future projections on your channel, Sebastian. That's one of the great things I love about your content. Anthony and I look more at historical analysis. You actually extrapolate that out to give price targets. So should Bitcoin hit 200,000 US, with not all miners being created equal, if you were going to group the miners by your top returning group, middle, and bottom, the example here is 6x, 5x, 4x. Who do you have in that top echelon right now, or tier one, I guess, buying candidates?
That would be some of the guys that have been underperforming here recently. I would say Riot, Bitfarms, maybe at that point. You're looking at they haven't performed well in the last probably 6 to 12 months or something like that, especially Riot. Riot's down at the bottom towards the end there. So Riot, I think, might have a potential to do a 6x, whereas Bitfarms, I think, could also do right around there if things work out for them and Riot leaves them alone. I think the stock could possibly bounce at that point. We could see maybe a little bit more than 6x. Then
Hey,
something
so just a quick point of contradiction there. So you think Riot can 6x, you think Bitfarms can 6x, but you don't think they could do it together.
I don't think, no.
Why?
Because I think if anything, this is going to just drag out longer. Even
Okay,
if they, let's just say that Riot is able to somehow get board seats on the Bitfarms board, they can then possibly try to sway the other board members to go with the deal. Even if
sure.
that happens, you're looking at probably what, a good year to a year and a half before all the regulatory, all the other stuff gets done. We saw with USBTC and HUD 8 how long that took. That took 12 months, right?
Gotcha.
To happen. So that would be, I think, not a great timing because Bitcoin at that point might be actually peaking right around the next 12 months or something like that. So
So it would almost act as a distraction, tie up their resources, kind of
yeah,
nothing against the company specifically, just more so their focus.
yeah. I mean, the focus is going to be there, and they can focus on the other things, but it's still going to be a little bit of a distraction, and it's just you're going to be dealing with a lot of regulatory, legal things, all that stuff. So I think they can do better individually than they can do combined, at least right now.
Sure.
Um,
Okay, so that's good to hear. Those are actually, like I say, both ones I hold. So that's great music to my ears. Who else would be in that top group?
in the top group, I mean, then you're just waiting to see if somebody comes out with great news. If somebody comes out, they have a great HPCI customer, or they're increasing their hash rate, doubling their hash rate, whatever it might be, then some of those other companies could also do really well. But based on what we have right now for the future growth of all these companies, I think that's basically about it that could possibly do a 6x from here where the stock prices are. Had you bought back towards the bottom in 2022, end of December, you're already up 6x, 7x, maybe even 10x on some of these guys already, right? So there's
Yeah,
gains. So a lot of those gains have been already made. Right now, we're just in that phase where you're going to get maybe 5 to 8x on some of these guys. I think some of the 5x are going to be like Marathon, CleanSpark, IREN, Cipher, maybe TeraWulf, some of those other guys that are in that play as well. Core Scientific could be in that 6x range, right?
yeah.
They got the HPCI customer there. That's going to be huge for them, but that's not going until next year. But it still could be there.
Yeah, I definitely could. I want to talk about them in a second here. Another great question from the audience here. Plan B has put out a prediction in their stock to flow ratio for Bitcoin at $500,000 US a coin. So in the last example, obviously a little bit lower than that. What are your thoughts on the stock to flow model? I've heard, and a lot of people in the industry, Frank Holmes is one of them, compare it obviously to digital gold. I've seen comparisons if Bitcoin was going to be valued the same as the gold market, what that would mean per coin. And then I also saw actually a really interesting statistic last night, Sebastian. If every single person in the world were to have the same amount of Bitcoin at today's prices, it would work out to about $173 worth of Bitcoin. So interesting to see the different angles you can play this. If you look at it, if you divide the gold market, if you divide the world population, or if you look to these stock to flow ratios, what is your thinking or feeling on Bitcoin long term?
Well, I think the stock to flow is pretty good metric to see where we're going to be possibly going up. I think sometimes it's on the higher end where it actually ends up at being. And it's very optimistic with Bitcoin. It's the way that he has it to work out with his calculations, everything else. I'm still thinking my original guesstimate was going to be around 180,000 this cycle based on what we've seen before, but that was not taking into account any of the ETFs. With that said, we might be going up higher than what I think. If that's the case, that's all better, right? There's also the power law. You can look at that. That's one's pretty good, and that one's been tracking pretty good with Bitcoin as well.
And sorry, just to confirm, so you were saying this cycle you predict around 180,000 US a coin, but that was before we saw all the ETF demand come in, hey?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your number now?
It's going to be north of that. I just don't know exactly where. We could be at 200, 250,000, somewhere around there, I'm guessing. Maybe even higher than that. It just all depends if the U.S. government starts using it as a treasury reserve, possibly, and push things up. If you got companies accepting it also in business transactions or putting it on the balance sheet. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs. So everything's
It's so hard to know. Hey, we all agree it's going parabolic, but determining where we're at on that line at this point in time or real time is so difficult. I've personally felt my own internal bias, Sebastian, as we go through the cycle. I'm getting more and more bullish, and I keep wanting to put that price target up. In terms of selling, one of my strategies is I'm going to actually try and base my portfolio or my Bitcoin mining portfolio on the price of Bitcoin itself. So setting initial targets, 95,000 US was my first sell point, to really try and take emotion out of it and ensure that I take advantage of the cyclical nature of Bitcoin. What is your sell strategy? Does it tie to Bitcoin price at all?
Yeah, it does. We'll have to see where we get to. I think right around 100,000 is where I'm going to start taking off a little bit off the plate, right? Taking profits is never a bad thing, especially if we've had a nice run up where you're up already 5x, 10x, whatever it might be from when you were buying in. That's a good time to possibly take profits. So yeah, I'm going to be looking at 100,000, possibly. Then if we get to like 125, I'm going to sell some more. But I'm looking at like smaller increments, like 5% here, 5% there. Not a whole. I'm not going to go 50% off right away. But we'll see where it goes. We're going to keep an eye on the charts. We're going to see what Bitcoin does. We're going to see what the regulations go forward with Bitcoin. What's the adoption? All that stuff's got to be taken into account to see what's actually happening there.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that. The reason I chose 95,000 is because I thought most people would probably have the 100 as their sell target, and we'd get a lot of selling pressure. So we'll see how that goes. Similar to you, though, I was going to go up in increments of $20,000 and then sell in 20% increments. So 95,000, sell off 20%, 115, the next 20%, so on and so forth. So we'll see how that works out. Hold me to it, Sebastian. When we're in the heart of the bull run here and I don't want to sell anything, you make sure you let me know. Bryce, you told me you would sell 20% at 95.
Do the same for me, because it is tough to sell, especially when things are going up. You're being more and more optimistic. It's like, it's going to go up even more. It's going to go up even more. And then we get eventually. So yeah, we got to take profits.
Okay, we'll hold each other accountable for that. And anyone else joining us down in Nashville this week, we'll start a little group here, the profit taking group. Now, next question, back to the miners. We got a question about Marathon here, so I'll bring their slide up, slide number 19, Sebastian. Now, interestingly enough, I put up an article here. They just came out with a big verdict against Marathon for $138 million related to Hut 8 Corp, actually. Michael Ho, so their CMO, is involved in this case as well. So this is an interesting storyline this week. Do you think the share price at this point has anything to do with this story from the 19th, or do you think it has more to do with Bitcoin price right now?
Combination of both a little bit. I mean, Marathon's down a little bit from where it was. It reached like what, $28, 27 something here in the last couple of days, and that was on actually the 17th. So that was right before the verdict. and then the stock kind of has been coming down here a little bit because of it. So I think it's a combination of both. It's not a great verdict there. 138 million is quite a bit. I mean, Marathon can pay it. They have over what, $1+ billion in cash and assets, so they can do it.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. It's not ideal. Do you think this will get I saw they're, I think, going to try and rebuttal against this or appeal it. Do you think this will get dragged out through the courts a little bit more?
Oh, heck yeah, yeah. They're
Yeah.
gonna spend the money on lawyers and everything else and see what happens from that.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, another behemoth in the industry actually is Riot. So we got a question here between Riot and Wolf in terms of infrastructure. Which do you think is doing better? So Riot obviously has the size with Corsicana and all the infrastructure that's obviously going in there. Wolf, though, they've got the clean infrastructure and that lake access or water access that we just talked about.
Yeah, so it depends on the use of it, right? Riot is going to be. They stated that they are going to be only Bitcoin mining. So that site that they have there, Corsicana, is ideal for Bitcoin mining. With the immersion that they're doing, that's perfect setup for it. TeraWulf, on the other hand, they do both. They're looking into both, right? Bitcoin mining and HPC AI. With HPC AI, that could fetch a little bit of a premium there, especially if they can build that site out and get a great customer in that location to help out with tier 3 data center build outs and things like that. So there's a difference between the two, depending on which one you want to go with. I think with Bitcoin possibly going up to where we think it's going to go, I think in the short term, next 12 months or so, I think maybe Riot does a little bit better because of it, especially when Bitcoin gets to like 100,000 plus. Where we normally see that as a break-even point between HPC and Bitcoin mining, as far as revenues are concerned and profits. And once it gets above that, then the Bitcoin miners do actually better than the HPC AI stuff. But I mean, those are usually only for like maybe 6 months, 6 to 9 months, where you have those great profits there historically, and then we go back down in the bear market, where it then becomes again a painful experience for the miners. With HPC AI, you have a more stable income potentially if you have a nice contract for it. So you have to look at it both ways. It's not both are equal in the same way. They're both different in their own ways, and you have to kind of weigh it each one that way.
Now, question for you as devil's advocate here. So you just mentioned that $100,000 price point. We've heard in that neighborhood, or 110-ish, is kind of the equilibrium point between profit for Bitcoin mining and HPC, Sebastian.
Mhm.
So do you feel like companies, and again, this is just a devil's advocate question, companies like Core Scientific, for example, who are locking up these megawatts for 12 years heading into a bull cycle, do you think that may be short-sighted in a sense, that they may be selling themselves short on higher Bitcoin potential based on this cycle?
Well, they're still up mining what they're mining, right? They're at 19 exahash right now. They signed a contract, or I think they're signing a contract with Block for their A6 machines to get to 15 exahash on top of it. Possibly, if they don't change out their machines, they'll get them to about 35 exahash. But I think with the contract size that they have here with CoreWeave, I think that's just such a doggone good deal that for me, it's a no-brainer for them to sign that contract and be in that for 12 years, because you have that locked in. You know what your revenue is going to be. With Bitcoin, yes, you have these potential nice upswings where Bitcoin goes parabolic, and you have the nice appreciation in that and the gains on it and the revenues, profits, all of that is for only like 6 to 9 months. And then the rest of the time you're scrambling, kind of trying to keep up with things and trying to improve machines again. So I think in that regard, I think the HPCI is a little bit better long term if you can get a great customer in there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and that's why I say devil's advocate. I'm a holder of Core Scientific, a happy shareholder of Core Scientific, and I think exactly like you say, Sebastian, the HPC just insulates the business, right? And then the Bitcoin mining is just the gravy on top or the icing on the cake. So I
Yep.
think it is the best of both worlds, the dual prong or dual revenue strategy. But I have heard people say, hey, it's a big commitment, right? Without knowing the price of where's Bitcoin price going to be in 8, 10, 12 years.
Yep.
Your guess is as good as mine. Now, while we're talking about Core Scientific, they also just achieved the threshold for their tranche 2 warrants. So they absolutely shredded through these price levels that they needed for these convertible notes, tranche 1 warrants, tranche 2. Core Scientific over $11, I think. I haven't looked recently here today, but I don't
Yeah,
know
it's
if you have it
1080
on.
right now.
What's that?
1080 right now.
Yeah. Okay. So comeback of the year, coming out of Chapter 11 up to an 1080 price on the Nasdaq. Absolutely phenomenal year for Adam Sullivan, the Core Scientific team. What's your take on this now that, number one, the debt burden has been alleviated, and number two, they have, I use the analogy, taking the handcuffs off Adam. He can now hold Bitcoin. He can do whatever he wants with this company without some of those bankruptcy covenants on the balance sheet. How do you feel about Core?
Oh, I think they're going to do very well going forward. The big catalyst for them was getting CoreWeave to sign up with them for 12 years. It was at 3.5 billion originally. They added another contract on top of that. They're over 4 billion now. I mean, that's just huge news. That gives them cash flow to do anything that they really want to. They can buy more sites. They can get more Bitcoin miners if they wanted to. The road ahead of them is fully open for whatever they want to do. It's just fantastic to see how the company has emerged from it. So kudos to Adam Sullivan for getting all this stuff done. He's done a fantastic job there.
Yeah, he certainly has. And in short order, too, if you look at some of the durations they had set up for these warrants, they're 3-5 years. And the fact that they were able to get through this in, I think, 6-7 months is just incredible.
Yeah.
Now you talk about CEOs. The next slide up, great day for this CEO. Company's up about 7%. DMG, this is one we called out in the intro. So they operate just actually next door to me here in Christina Lake. So one province over. Unlike you, we don't use states up here, Sebastian. We use provinces. So they're one province or state over. This is an image of that facility. So obviously smaller scale than some of these other miners. Do you cover DMG in your analysis regularly?
I do in my smaller miners. So I cover them once a month, and I got to do that this coming weekend. I haven't done it yet. So I'll cover like DMG, DigiHost, Hive, not Hive, sorry, Argo, Sphere, Stronghold, and there's another one in there. Mawson, I think, is in there as well. Those smaller miners that I do cover.
Gotcha. Now, what are you thinking about DMG? One of the questions Anthony and I talk about a lot, if you look at market cap on some of these companies, the difficulty or disparity between kind of the haves and have-nots, right? You mentioned Marathon's balance sheet. They have the ability to pay a $138 million lawsuit if needed. DMG in quite a different situation. They are growing. They are installing next generation miners. Obviously, the share price is being rewarded for that, but they definitely don't have the balance sheet, the ATM availability of some of these larger cap miners.
Yeah, I mean, I like DMG. They have their Bitcoin mining. They do also hosting. They also have applications that they have. Blockseer, I think, is one of them. They also have their own pool. So doing a lot of great things in the space, but they are smaller. They are only, I think, right now at 2 exahash or getting to 2 exahash. And that's, I think, combined with the hosting side of things. They are smaller, right? I think DMG and DigiHost are maybe one of the ones that are going to be able to survive compared to like Argo, which doesn't own any infrastructure. Sphere doesn't own any infrastructure. Stronghold has issues with costs with their sites. And then you have Mawson just kind of transitioned over to more hosting than anything else. And they have older machines as well. So I think out of those, DMG and DigiHost are probably the ones that might be able to survive this this next couple months here, a year or two.
Gotcha. Now, this is a slide we talk about quite regularly. It's ranking the miners by market cap on the right there. So you can see Marathon at the top, just north of 6.3 billion. At the bottom, we've got SATO Technologies at 23 million. So an absolutely massive spread between the top and bottom company in terms of market cap. I've highlighted the companies over $1 billion. You can see you mentioned Hive, Bit Digital, kind of in the $500 million range. Yep. And then a big drop to that next group with DMG being the top in about 110 million. Keep in mind that's Canadian dollars though. Do you feel like there's going to need to be some M&A here? Do you think these companies have a viable business model on the list, or what do you see transpiring for this smaller market cap group over the next year or so?
Well, I think some of the ones like DMG, I think they're in a pretty good spot where they are. They've been in this for a while now, so they know what they're doing. Their costs are really good also. Their overhead is low, so I think they can continue to survive going forward, maybe even thrive a little bit if they can get Bitcoin to go up. They can get the share price to go up. At that point, maybe they can use the ATM at that point and build out even further and grow. So like I said, I don't think DMG has an issue there. DigiHost, same thing. The ones that I am worried about are the ones that don't have any assets. So Argo, Sphere 3D, right? Those two are a concern of mine because I mean, they're still operating on machines that are 100 terahash and no infrastructure, nothing there. So what are you actually buying with those companies other than older generation machines and no infrastructure? So who's going to really buy them out? You may see maybe a consolidation between some of these companies where they merge, do like a merger of equals or something like that, just to get some synergies, maybe some from that alone. But yeah, it's going to be tough for some of these smaller guys.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up. The capex cycle on the miners is so significant. Now, speaking of capex investment and having the newest machines on the AI HPC side, Sebastian, we're starting to see companies buying the H100s. What do you expect the life cycle to be on these? You talk about the progression of the chips, the next major cycle in 2028. Do you think they're going to get a good 2, 3, 4 years out of these H100s?
Yeah, I think out of those, if they're in the right facilities, you can get probably 3 to 4 years, maybe even excuse me, even 5 years out of them, because they're in a well-controlled environment. If you have a tier 3 data center, it's always stable temperatures, always the same. So yeah, you can probably get 3 to 5 years out of them. And then it's a different cycle with the HPC I think a little bit, because was it NVIDIA's coming out with a new chip next year, the Blackwell, which is supposed to be even a lot better than the H100s right now. And then the following generation chips are going to be, I believe, water cooled. So that's going to be a different setup altogether. So I think they're going to have to keep pace with that if they want to obviously compete in the HPCI business. Or unless they're like leasing the facilities to somebody, then it's on the customer there to do the chips themselves. But otherwise, it can be very costly to do that.
Yeah, it certainly can, and that's why the CoreWeave deal is so nice, right? They don't have to worry about updating the machines themselves. We
Yeah.
talked about that Blackwell development with Frank Holmes last night on the podcast, so it's going to be interesting to see how these companies continue to keep up. On the HPC AI front, do you prefer the vertically integrated, owning the infrastructure, the data center, the chips, or do you like the lease model?
I think I like the lease model better. It's not as costly, and you're still getting great margins from it. So why put yourself out and spend billions of dollars on these AI chips, and then unless you really get a customer that signs up really, really well for you, and it's beneficial to you to do that, that you can get an ROI on it in like 2 years, maybe then it's okay. But for the most part, I would say build the data centers, have customers come in there, put their own stuff in there. It's going to be a lot less expensive for you going forward, and you still can make great profits on it.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, now I'm going to pivot back to the Q&A portion here. We got another few questions from the subscribers, Sebastian, not company specific. So this one's interesting in terms of timing. Some people are expecting Bitcoin to peak in June of next year. Some people are expecting towards Christmas of this year. Some people are saying right now is kind of the perfect time to start the bull run. Where do you see Bitcoin, and then secondly, the Bitcoin miners peaking here this cycle?
I mean, that's a great question there. This cycle is completely different from this other cycles that we've seen in the past. My thoughts are, what if we have an extended cycle where it's not just the 12 to 18 months before we peak? What if it takes 3 to 5 years before we peak? Potentially, right? What with the ETFs and everything else and the adoption that's happening right now, what if it's the same kind of cycle that we saw with gold when the ETFs came out for that, where it was like a 3 to 6 year bull cycle at that point? What happens then? So that's something I'm keeping an eye on, trying to see if I can figure out if that's going to happen. It's tough to figure that out until it actually happens.
I was going to say, how do you figure that one out?
Yeah, it's just you have to see where things go from here, right? Do we have a little bit, maybe a slower increase in Bitcoin price, where we're not going from here to 100,000 by the end of the year, but maybe it takes us until like March of next year to get to 100,000 or something like that, right? So we're going to look at those things, see how that demand and that price appreciation is happening, or if we're going to get the parabolic rise like we've seen before in the prior cycles, where we go from here to 200,000 within the next 9 months or something like that. That's going to be a huge increase in price. So that's kind of what I'm looking at there. If we have a similar cycle like we had last time, then I would think that we would probably peak somewhere around October, maybe September of next year, right? Somewhere around there, where we're looking at about 15 months out after the halving events to 16 months after the halving event. So that's kind of what I'd be looking for. And yes, the miners do front run Bitcoin. We saw it last cycle. Majority of the miners, pretty much all of them except Marathon, peaked right when before Bitcoin got to 63,000, which was right around April, before we had that the rug pulled from us from China at that point. And then we went back up to 69,000. The only miner that actually followed that was Marathon at that point.
Well, and your point is interesting about an extended cycle because, as you say, last cycle there was a rug pull from the China ban. That cycle likely would have continued had we not had that global kind of shock factor.
Yeah.
Plus, not to mention now Bitcoin's mainstream. There's been the FASB accounting rules. There's been the ETFs. There's been
Yeah.
the political positioning. There's been so many macro catalysts that just weren't around when it was guys in their garages mining Bitcoin. Like those were different times, different cycles, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, so you're saying kind of fall next year would be traditional cycle. You think it may actually extend to a longer cycle. So somewhere kind of after fall next year is your buying zone, I suppose, or sort of selling zone. Hey.
Maybe even longer than that. I mean, what if it's a couple year cycle? Right? What if we don't have that bear market? What if we only go down 20% or 25% from, a new high? We go down 20%, then we go back up to a new high again. And we just do that for like 5, 6 years or keep doing that going forward, where we don't have these bear markets anymore. I would love to have a bear market again so I can buy again the miners at a much cheaper price and repeat this process again and get another 5 to 10x on some of these guys, right? But I just don't know. We'll have to see how that's going to play out. So that's the interesting part for me right now is looking to see where will it be in the next year? Where will it be in the next 2 years? Will we get another bear market or not?
Doesn't sound to me like you're going to be selling at 100, Sebastian. It sounds like you're ready for the ultra cycle here. Now, in all seriousness, another new factor is the AI HPC revenue stability that we didn't really have with these miners in the past. Do you think that's also going to, I guess, reduce the impact of these bear cycles from a miner specific standpoint? Bitcoin, yes, may still go through a bear cycle, but the miners perhaps have a more muted reaction now.
Potentially. The ones that have a long-term contract like Core, I think. Bit Digital has a 3-year contract, which they are through 6 months of it already, right? So they're going to be possibly in that bear. So I would think with customers or with miners having good customers for HPC, long-term contracts, they may weather the storm better than ones that don't have anything like that. Even if if the miners have a short-term contract, that might still be kind of rough on them a little bit.
Yeah, the other angle I really like, and in my own head, what's changing from a trade mentality to more a long-term investment mentality with a lot of these companies is just the asset value, right? The infrastructure itself, the energy infrastructure, the access to megawatts. I don't think this is a trend that's going away, regardless of what Bitcoin price does, bull or bear cycle.
Yeah.
So that's really appealing to me too, if they start to pay out dividends or something like that down the road. Now, another question, I guess also to do with timing. Do we think Bitcoin and the stocks are going to have a big pullback, a sell the news type of event, similar to almost to what we kind of saw with the ETF there, based on the Bitcoin convention this week? There's so much anticipation. Trump's coming. He's going to announce this strategic reserve. All these people are going to be focused on Bitcoin. Do you think it may fall flat?
Yeah, time will tell on that one. I mean, we are up approximately 26% from where we kind of bottomed out here just a couple of weeks ago on Bitcoin. So, we're actually like 22% up from where we were just a week or two ago on Bitcoin. Is that due because of the Bitcoin convention happening in Nashville? Maybe. I don't know. It could be that we just bottomed out and we're going back up. Unless the news that he comes out with that they're going to use it as a treasury asset or something like that. But that's going to have to change also some laws here in the United States because right now they can only hold treasuries, mortgage-backed securities, some other things as well. They would have to change the law in order to be able to hold Bitcoin as well. So it's going to take time on that side of things, but we'll see what they say. Either way, if it goes up or down, doesn't matter to me. I'm still looking at the longer time frame. Short time, it can do whatever it wants. It can go down, it can go up. I don't care.
Yeah, I have the exact same mentality. I don't think we're going to see much of a sell the news here. I think we are really very close to this pinnacle of just absolutely letting the bull out of the cage here in terms of Bitcoin adoption, interest, FOMO, price, you name it. But I think this could be the week that we really start to see the gears start to turn here.
Yeah.
Also, it's forcing the Democrats to really scale up their political platform in terms of a crypto policy as well. So that's another great example of one policy or one candidate makes a statement and then another reaction or ripple effect down the road, eh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Democrats have been kind of they were being led by what's her name, Elizabeth Warren, I believe, and I think she's just so anti-crypto, anti anything that's non-cash related that it's crazy. and to their detriment, I think. They really need to start waking up and get to the 21st century. And that's why I think we need politicians that are younger. We have a lot of politicians that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. You need to let the old guard out and put in the new guard in there, I think.
Well, and it just what's disappointing is anyone who's stuck in their ways, right? If you just refuse to learn about new things, that's just a recipe for disaster. And
Yeah.
that's what I really admire about Larry Fink and some of these guys. These are extremely smart, well-respected, wealthy people. They can pretty much say and do and think whatever they want, but they're coming out and saying, "Hey, you know what? I was wrong. I've reevaluated. I've learned. I've taken a 180 on Bitcoin." That to me represents a much stronger leader than someone who just says, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to learn about anything new," and that's that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that just personal thoughts there, but it's unfortunate to see politicians that are just closed minded like that.
Well, maybe they're not closed minded, but they are being backed by other constituents that might be like
Sure,
the banks and things like that that are backing them. And it's like they got to appease the banks a little bit. So you got to go against something that the banks don't like. Right. So you got to look at it that way too.
that's more unfortunate points of politics, but we'll leave that for another one.
Yeah.
Hey, now in the past couple days, we've seen trading volume actually pull back on a lot of these companies. Obviously, share price has pulled back a little bit in the last couple days too. Do you think we're just taking a breather here? Do you see any type of institutional positioning before these expected announcements? What do you think's going on with volume this week?
I think it's just a little bit of a pullback. Things went up nicely last week and the week prior to a little bit as well with the miners, especially. I think you're going to see these kind of healthy pullbacks. We're kind of range trading a little bit on some of these guys. I'm looking at CleanSpark right now. It's been bouncing between like the $16 range to $15 range up to like the close to $20 range. And it's just been bouncing back and forth between that for the past probably, gosh, 2 to 3 months or something like that after the halving event. And I think that's going to continue on. Some of these miners that did very well here recently, Wolf, Hut 8, others as well. It's I think the catalyst is driving it is the HPCI play. And I think eventually by the time we get into like August, I think things are going to start getting a little bit more better for the miners going forward into the fall. We're in the summertime. There's people that are taking vacations right now. They're enjoying the summers. And you have a little bit less activity, I think, in the stock market in general and in the miners for sure.
Yeah, buy and sell in May and go away.
Yeah.
It's definitely slower on the McNallie money side of things as well, in terms of videos and interest for some of the other sectors. So I think it could just be, like you say, kind of the time of the year here.
Yeah.
Now we talked about Bitdeer a little bit earlier, Sebastian, in terms of the seal miners. So I wanted to pull them up. We've got a slide specifically for Bitdeer. They're going to be at the event in Nashville as well here. Jeff LaBerge and I have been messaging. We're going to meet up, so you're more than welcome to join. You can
Thank
see they've got the big advertisement, meet the Bitdeer team here. Pretty much all of these miners, you guys have a stand or a booth at the event. So we're going to be going around other than obviously when we're speaking and just talking to as many people as possible. So make sure if you're coming to Nashville, you stop us, you chat with us. We'd love to hear from you. Now, in addition to that, Bitdeer is also making big strides on their AI side of the company as well. So I wanted to get your take in terms of vertically integrated. Bitdeer is really top notch in the industry. What's your thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I mean, Bitdeer has definitely turned around here recently. They went public. When was it? Just last year that they went public, I believe. And they're doing a lot of great things here. Their growth for this year is a little bit limited, but they have a lot of growth going into 2025. And then they are getting into the HPCI business. They are doing their own ASIC machines, which is fabulous because then they can buy them at cost, basically, or produce them at cost. So they get a lot of benefits from that as well. Then they could sell it to customers as well, as long as they're great machines, which I don't doubt that they will be.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lot of things going for them. Self mining, cloud hash that they're doing, also hosting. I mean, it's looking to be like a possibly a pretty big juggernaut going forward, but a lot of the growth is not going to be until 2025.
You okay over there, buddy? We
Yeah,
losing you before Nashville?
no, I'm good. Just a
You
little,
just got to make it two
little
more
fun.
days. Yeah, a lot of growth backloaded. They, in terms of pipeline, they have one of the biggest kind of future development pipelines of any miner. Absolutely massive coming on next year. Hey,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they
yeah,
got sites all over the world. I mean, Ohio, they're doing stuff in uh,
Bhutan.
Bhutan. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
all over the place.
all over. Now, another company that's got a lot in terms of experience here. I wanted to talk about Griffin because If you look at this stock, it's one of the smaller cap miners we cover. They've got leaders from some of the biggest companies, not only Bitcoin mining companies, Marathon and Riot, but IBM, Cantor Fitzgerald in the world. I'm not sure, again, if this is one you talk about regularly on the channel, but we've had a few questions about Griffin and your specific thoughts on this one as well.
Griffin, I mean, they're one of the smallest miners there. I do not cover them right now. I keep an eye on see what they're doing. They are looking to grow. They'd like to go to like 10 exahash, I think, through mergers and acquisitions. And they're looking for some of these private miners, potentially not so much on the public side of things, to bring into their family, I guess.
Yep.
And they don't own any infrastructure right now. They're all hosted. So we'll see how they do. I mean, they seem like they have a pretty smart team there. I'm wishing them all the best going forward, but it's going to be tough for them to compete with some of the big boys right now.
Yeah, it definitely, we talk about that growth strategy and some of the obstacles here. So this is one that may be involved, like you say, in a merger of equals. I could see maybe something like that happening for the Griffin team. Now, speaking of M&A, I wanted to get your take. We haven't had you on since CleanSpark came out with the big grid announcement, and I know you follow CleanSpark closely. I also put in a great comment from Matt Schultz. So this is the chairman for CleanSpark, talking about just the overwhelming adoption here. So Donald Trump, then his VP, JD Vance, then BlackRock, Larry Fink, JP Morgan, just really this snowball effect we're seeing in terms of the political and support environment for Bitcoin. But specifically, what are your thoughts on grid acquisition? They've been acquiring a lot of sites, very active in the M&A space. Do you think they got a good deal on this one?
I think so. Maybe it was a little bit high, I think, from the megawatt side of things. I think they paid 400 some odd thousand for it. Typically, they've been paying about 300 some odd thousand per megawatt in general, and maybe even less than that. So they paid a little bit more for it, but they needed it. They need to grow to the 32 exahash they want to grow this year. So I think it was a pretty good deal there for them to reach their targets that they need to reach their targets for this year.
Great. And how do you feel about their target for year end? Do you think there's any concerns there?
The only concern is going to be building out, improving the sites as well, growing the megawatts there. That's the only concern. But they do have the sites, I believe, to get to 32 exahash now with the roadmap that they have. They can also buy additional sites like that they have been buying, just these little 5 to 10 megawatt sites, and improving them, and growing their megawatts that way. So we'll see. I mean, they have the weird thing with CleanSpark is they have machines on order 50 exahash that are supposed to be coming in this year, based on the delivery schedules that they had put out in the contracts. So I'm wondering, are they actually going to surprise us and maybe get closer to 50 exahash by the end of the year? I don't know. Could be.
Well, and if they don't, what are they doing with these machines? I guess is the other question, right? Where they're just sitting there in storage. Now, another question we have in the chat is about Cathedra and Soluna holdings. So I don't have a slide for Cathedra. I do have one for Soluna, so I'll bring that one up. Actually had some information about their new NVIDIA GPUs and giving access to customers. So what are your thoughts on these ones?
So I don't color Cathedra at all. I haven't really looked into them. I think I've looked at them once or twice because people asked about them, but that's about it. So I don't know much about that one. Soluna, I've covered them in the past. They stopped providing monthly operational updates back in 2022, which we saw with quite a few miners do that when they got into a little bit of financial issues there. They have since remedied those, and they got a new CEO in place. This new CEO seems to be doing a lot better job. They are working with partners. So I need a little bit more time to see how that plays out for them with the partner side of things, how much revenue they could keep from all that partnership and things like that going forward to really be able to recommend anything that they're doing. But they got interesting sites that they're building out, and they're looking to be pretty green, renewable, so solar, wind as well. So that's kind of interesting that they're doing that.
Yeah, it really is. I've looked a lot at Soluna, and small player for sure, as we saw in that market cap sheet, but that small size opens up opportunities for renewable behind the meter access that just aren't available to some of these big CleanSparks or Marathons or things like that. So this is definitely an interesting one. Do you hold shares in Soluna, Sebastian?
I do not know.
Yeah, this is not one I personally hold right now. I know that Anthony does. This is a big part of his pension account, but definitely one to do some due diligence on if you guys haven't heard of them or aren't familiar. Cathedra as well. I don't follow them. I was actually just reading about them today. I think they had a special vote or something with their shareholders, but not one that we cover on the channel, Peter, unfortunately. The next two I wanted to pick your brain on are the H's, the Hive and the Hut. We actually had Hive on last night for an interview. So we've got Frank and Aiden there in nice form talking about the Paraguay expansion. I just asked you about that in relation to Bitfarms, if you think we'll see more companies going into South America. So that's a super interesting storyline here as well. But that's going to enable them essentially to double their hash rate. This is one of the most undervalued miners in terms of $1 million or dollars per exahash benchmark. Do you think this is a takeout candidate? Do you think they should stay on their own, similar to your thoughts on Bitfarms? What's your take?
I think they're going to stay on their own. They've been doing this since 2017. They've been publicly traded. I think they were one of the first to go publicly traded. This will just, their expansion to Paraguay and the expansion in their hash rate, doubling it to 12 exahash, a little bit beyond that. I think they're just doing it to keep up with the network hash rate. They've always stated that they want to maintain 1% of the network hash rate. And this will probably get them to it because, I mean, last night we saw network hash rate get to 800 some already exahash, right? And that's just on that one day. I like to look at the 30-day average on it. So that's going to take us probably through the end of the year. I think we're going to be somewhere around 800 to 900 exahash on average over the 30 days. Then if they're looking to build out in next year, we're looking at sometime around this time next year where they're going to be plugging miners and things like that in Paraguay. And at that point, I think the network hash rate is going to be probably around 1,200 to maybe 1,300 exahash. And that will give them basically the 1% exahash that they want to have compared to Bitcoin going forward. I'd like to see them be a little bit more aggressive in their growth, try to keep up with the big boys, try to even take out the big boys in that regard, because they have been so long in this. I've owned Hive in the past from 2017 through basically last year. And the only reason I sold the stock was I didn't see them being as ambitious in their growth going forward. They said they want to maintain 1%. Okay. I can respect that. They're very efficient in their operations, great cost structures on overhead and things like that. They're really good miners. The only thing that I didn't like was their growth.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because Frank specifically addressed that last night. And the word he used is just conservative in terms of their operations from a financial policy. That's the same reason they didn't loan out their Bitcoin. They don't have interest in Ethereum staking. They're solid operators. They're efficient operators. You're right. Their SG&A is industry leading, and they're content with that 1% target. Interesting though, it does line up very nicely with kind of those expected global hash rate numbers, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got to see some planning or foresight there. Now we've got about 20 more minutes. I know you've got an hour and a half here, Sebastian. So a few more miners to get through. Next one up is Hut 8. So they're obviously going to be down in Nashville as well. Looking really forward to seeing the team. This is the other side of the story with Mara. So basically, Mike Ho, for those of you who don't know, or Michael Ho, is the CSO at Hut 8 Corp. He was a co-founder at USBCT alongside Asher Janud, who's the CEO now. And he was involved with this lawsuit with Marathon, and they've now ruled in his favor for $138 million, basically saying that Michael Ho developed their growth strategy that Marathon actually implemented, but they didn't compensate him for that. What do you think here from the other side of the coin, I guess, Sebastian?
Well, to be honest, I don't know enough about the lawsuit. What are the accusations and things like that? So I'm not going to comment on that. But as far as Hut 8 is concerned, they've had a huge run up here recently in stock price over the last couple of weeks, which is kind of nice to see because they were way under on things. For me, it's still very hard to figure out where they should be valued at based on all the stuff that they're doing. And the data that we only have on them is only for the first quarter of this year with the combined company, with them being Hut 8 and USBTC. So it's a little difficult there. I'm still not happy with their just hash rate growth in general for self mining. I mean, they're still running older machines. They haven't done anything with purchasing new machines. They keep saying that they're going to do it. They're not doing it. So it seems like they're positioning more or transitioning more into hosting managed services and possibly HPC AI than they are into Bitcoin mining. So we'll see how that works out for them.
It kind of feels like that for me too. I know they do have that huge hodl, so I know they've got an affinity to Bitcoin, but it does feel like they're kind of getting away, even with their monthly updates, right? Putting the focus on some of these other business units. So interesting there. And I just saw actually a comment from Jane. Yeah, Anthony's birthday today. That's why he's not here, for any of you wondering why Sebastian is on in place of Anthony. It's his birthday, so we let the guy off for a day here to go out and enjoy some time with family. Now, the next slide up, 18, is IREN, formerly known as Iris Energy. Now, they've come out, they had a short report come out last week or maybe the week before. Not the first we've seen in the industry. Actually, speaking of Hut 8, they just got through a short report as well.
Yep.
So specifically nice to see that share price appreciation. Hut basically tripled, like from 6 to 20 in the last couple of weeks. So I wonder how the shorts are feeling on that one. But anyways, IREN had a short report as well. Since then, they've appointed Morgan Stanley as their financial advisor. They outline a number of their key business units, most notably on line 1, 30 exahash this year. IREN is an absolute beast. This is a top 3 hold for me as well. We had Dan on the program, Sebastian. He almost laughed. I said, do you think you'll get to 30 exahash? He said, all we have to do is plug the things in. Like we have the site, we know how to build the buildings, got the equipment. Like, what do you mean we'll get to 30 exahash? Of course we'll get to 30 exahash. And then you see other companies that are struggling to break 1 even, right? Or 10. So very interesting company. I love the leadership. I love the outlook of Dan and the rest of the team. What are your thoughts on IREN?
Yeah, I love IREN too. I was getting into IREN back in November, December of last year, slowly getting into them. And the only reason that was because back in 2022, they had to turn back a lot of miners back into their lender because they were not profitable at that point, and they had the special purpose vehicles that were loaned for those. So at that point, I was actually looking into IREN back in 2022. But when that happened, I had to pause a little bit. I'm like, okay, let's see how they do going forward, because they did give back a lot of their hash rate. And then since then, they have done a fantastic job growing their hash rate, getting their facilities up and running. Operations have been great as far as uptime, all that stuff that I look at that I find valuable and interesting and needed in this space. So for that reason, I'm like, okay, it's time to start getting back into IREN. And then when they came out with the news that they're getting 30 exahash, the stock started to take off on me. And that's when I decided, okay, I think there's more room to run up here in IREN than there was in CleanSpark at the time. So I sold a portion of my CleanSpark shares, bought more IREN. And yeah, now it's in my top 3 positions that I have, including CleanSpark, Bitfarms, and IREN.
Yeah, I remember that day because I inaccurately quoted you as selling all your CleanSpark and moving it over to IREN. Although that may have been a good move. Looking back now at this point in time, IREN has grown considerably in mine as well, though, and it seems to be a company that continues to perform. Do you have any worry about this short report? I know last week IREN wasn't moving as much as some of the other stocks. People were worried that the short pressure was holding them down. Do you think it has any more or merit?
I don't think it has any merit. I think whenever you get a short report, it's going to drag a stock down for a little bit. And the only thing that I will agree with the short report was that the stock was a little bit overvalued at that point. They just ran up way too fast, too quickly, and got too high. We needed a little bit of healthy pullback in it, and that's exactly what we got from it. And I love where the stock is at right now. I think it's going to do great going forward.
Yeah, I think most people were kind of expecting that pullback, and really that's no fault of anyone. It's just an excited market. Interesting, we have Freedom by 40 on sometimes, and he does technical analysis, Sebastian. I'm trying to crack the egg here, the chicken and the egg debate. Do you feel like technical analysis is really the basis of how these stocks and charts move, and then these fundamental news stories kind of support the technical, or do you think the news and the fundamentals drive companies and the technical are a result of that?
Well, I think it's the news that drives anything on this. We saw news with IREN when they came out to 30 exahash. They're growing and speeding up the timeline to get to 20 exahash. What happened? The stock took off, right? At that point. So I think that drives it. And then we had the short report come out that kind of dumped it, but the short report came out at perfectly timed when they were really like peak.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that drove it down. I think that helped the sell side of things on that one. So I think it's more news driven than anything else. And then also driven by Bitcoin, where Bitcoin's going, and news around Bitcoin and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't even know the answer. I remember Freedom on our show, though, talking about Bitcoin price, saying, hey, he expects a big move in the next short while here. And he said, I don't know what the catalyst will be, but something will come out. And then immediately Trump said he's coming to the conference and making this strategic reserve announcement. And I just keep thinking back to that conversation saying, wow, he didn't even know what it was going to be, but just knew something. And yeah,
Yeah, but it could be anything, right? It could be any kind of news story
could be
that's
anything.
positive on it. And depending if you're looking at the RSI and you're looking at the waves that they're doing, the counts, right? And the waves, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
things like that. I mean, you can see where things are possibly going to be going eventually. All you need is just, I think, one good catalyst to propel it going forward.
Yeah, it's the Elliott wave theory, and someone called him an Elliotician. I've never heard of it. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. And I want to definitely look into it. I think there's probably the value is in combining the two of them and using some of both, I would assume. Now, next one, and actually our last company to discuss individually here is SATO Technologies. CEO Romain is going to be hosting a panel talking about ordinals, and obviously a great mind or speaker in the space. In addition to that, I've posted one of Anthony's recent articles here. SATO Technology is very similar to Hive in your comments of a strong, efficient operator.
Yep.
Smaller size, but they know what they're doing. Hey.
Yeah, I like Seto. Seto is also one of those small, great operators that's just been doing this really good here for the last probably what, year to 2 years. How long have they been out? I can't even remember. They're probably out for like what, last 2 years, a year, right?
Yeah, in
Yeah,
the range.
yeah. So they're doing really good on the operation side of things, really efficient, great uptimes as well. It's just a growth story for them now. Can they grow as much as they would like to grow and compete with some of the bigger guys here? Because I think at that point they would possibly catch a little bit better price on the stock price.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so we've come to the end of, I guess, the individual companies here. We had one question come up, kind of your top pick, I guess, Sebastian, in terms of a large cap, mid cap, small cap. I'll bring it up on the slide here. Maybe we'll get your take here in closing if you have any closing thoughts, and we can wrap it up with this one.
Yeah. So a large cap, I mean, that's a tough one because you have quite a few great companies in that space right now. Um, man, I'm going to go with my original one, the CleanSpark. I think that one might surprise us. We'll see. Uh,
Okay.
Mid cap right now, I would probably go with Bitfarms, and then smaller cap, I would probably go with maybe Hive.
There you have it. Well, you heard it here first, you guys. This is July 23rd, Bitcoin Nashville week. Those are your top picks from Sebastian. We covered all of the individual miners this week. We also covered a ton of news and big developments in the space. Sebastian, you're going to be joining us in Nashville on Thursday. We'll be walking around together, you guys. If you guys happen to see us, come up, grab a picture, say hi, tell us about who you are and where you're from. We'd love to see you. Sebastian, I'll give it to you for closing thoughts here. Really appreciate the insight and looking forward to seeing you this week, buddy.
Yeah, Bryce, thanks you so much for having me on. I always love coming on. It's always fun. We've known each other now for probably over a year, going on maybe a year and a half or something like that. It's always fun. It's a great community that we have here that we can come on each other's channels and have fun. Big thing, just be patient out there. I think we're still early in this cycle. So we're going to see these ups and downs happen in Bitcoin and miners as well. Just be patient in there. If you have a longer time frame mentality, you're going to do very, very well. Dollar cost averaging if you can. And yeah, love to see you guys in Nashville. If you do stop by, like Bryce said, say hello. We'd love to talk to you guys. So I'll leave it at that.
That's a great close. It reminds me of a quote I heard. Treat your trading account like a bar of soap. The less you touch it, the more you'll have. Over trading, being patient are things you need to watch for. So,
I love that.
Sebastian, always a valuable insight. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in a couple days, and we'll talk.